This episode of the BeanCast is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you advertise on LinkedIn, you can build lasting relationships with customers that often translate to high-quality leads, website traffic, and higher brand awareness. For a free $100 LinkedIn ad credit, go to linkedin.com/BeanCast. Terms and conditions apply. Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Transcription services provided by transcribeme.com. Visit them on the web at transcribeme.com/BeanCast for up to 25% off. That's transcribeme.com. Episode 524, Flashing 12. For Monday, December 10th, 2018, it's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob Norp. Thanks for joining us. Autonomous vehicles, more mobility options, the 5G rollout, advancements in out-of-home media. Each is grabbing headlines, but together they are about to transform the way we think about mass awareness. How so? Tonight we'll discuss. Also, taking rewarded video ads to the next level, the fracturing streaming space, whether bad negotiation is why publisher ad revenue is diminishing, plus this week's Ad Fail 5. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with Senior Director of Communications at SME, Mr. Christopher Barger. Christopher, welcome back.
Thank you very much, Bob. Good to be back.
Now, next up, we have the founder and principal of marketing consultancy Future Forth, Mr. Dave Delaney. Hi, Dave.
Hey, Bob. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Now, also with us, we have the co-founder and admiral of the HMS Beagle, author, speaker, Mr. Joseph Jaffe. Joe, what's happening?
Ahoy there, Mr. Norp.
It's bad enough I have to say the admiral part. You don't have to say the ahoy.
Wait, I haven't made you say ahoy to me yet. So that's next week.
I get the Popeye theme music in my head every time.
And finally, we welcome the Executive Vice President of Media and Technology for Curve Interactive, Ms. Marika Roque. Hi, Marika.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
Oh, glad that you can make it on the program. Now, we have a lot to cover, and the first topic is kind of a complicated one, so let me set it up here. Everyone is talking about the growth in mobility services. And this is talking about the ride-sharing apps, and we're talking about the scooters, the shared scooters, and we're talking about bike rentals and all these different mobility services. And we also hear a lot about the 5G rollout in mobile data streaming and how this is going to transform the way the public will access the internet at blazing speeds. And now more on that later. But it's where the two are connected where things get really, really interesting. Now, looking beyond the fact that autonomous vehicles, which is key to ride sharing, needs access to fast internet speeds, it's also going to transform the way we entertain and market to each other. So, Christopher, we already see in-vehicle screens, but now startups are piloting on-vehicle screens to run advertisements, and we're seeing all kinds of media opportunities in autonomous vehicles and new ways that all of this is going to be serviced by the 5G pipes that are going to be put in place by the telecoms. How does the confluence of these disruptive forces change the way that we will advertise across the board in all kinds of manner? What's your thoughts and what's your take on this?
You know, I think it's a very exciting time for us to be doing what we're doing if we apply creativity and sort of maintain customer centricity, because the danger that you get into with intermodal mobility like this is we can be even more intrusive, we can be more unwelcome. So there's going to be a little bit of necessity of us as marketers and as the industry, thinking about whether we are being contextually relevant or we're just taking advantage of technology to be where people are. That said, I think, especially if you talk about autonomous vehicles, people are going to be digitally sharing their details about their preferences, about what they do in order to customize the autonomous experience. If we can strike deals with the mobility providers to access that kind of data, you've got comedy gold. You've got everything that you could potentially want. You've got the ability to provide contextually relevant personalization, that opportunity to give people what they want in terms of where they are, what they're doing. That part of it is really exciting. But Bob, where I think the real big change for us in marketing and advertising is actually going to be behind the scenes in the data platform. Frankly, this is going to increase the number of opportunities we have to interact with people. This is going to increase the number of touch points. And it's really going to require us, if we're going to do this right, getting back to my point about not being intrusive and being relevant, if we're going to do this right, we really have to have a good handle on a customer data platform, on that sort of golden customer record, that idea that I know every time I've interacted with Joe or with Marika or with Dave, with Bob, I know every single time that I've done it, I'm able to utilize that to provide a contextually relevant experience. That to me is where you're going to see a significant amount of investment, even beyond just the outward facing advertising.
I love how you took it right away to the relevance and contextuality of what's going on inside the vehicle, or what's going on about the mobility device that's being transporting the person. I think that's important in terms of making sure that we remain ethical about the way we treat this new medium. But there's another aspect of this that I find really super interesting, and I want to go to Joe on this next question, because Joe, we're going to have a lot more free time when we're in an autonomous vehicle. I mean, that in particular seems to me like a huge opportunity, not just turning the automobile or the transportation into an opportunity for serving content and bringing content and living room type experiences into the vehicle, but it also frees up your eyes to look outside the vehicle and see all the out-of-home opportunities that are available for us to advertise and connect with consumers. You're not having to watch the road as much. You're able to, have the freedom to look around you and see the sights. How is this going to transform the way we approach mass awareness? Are we going to start looking at the vehicle as the primary source of opportunity for us to reach the most possible captive eyeballs at one time? It seems like it's a better opportunity than just the living room television.
Look, if I was being cynical, I would say, was that a comment or a question? But the reality is that comment was a perfect comment. I mean, you basically nailed it. And it's hard for me to even build on top of what you said, but I'll add a few things. One is, I think we have to take a step back to take a few forward. And for anybody that's been on the Acela, on Amtrak's Acela, or even tethering to their mobile phone on a train, would recognize that connectivity is still pretty scatty and not very reliable. And so certainly there's an infrastructure aspect to this. But let's assume, fast forward, that the seamless connectivity is just available everywhere.
And that's the reason I brought up the 5G element. I mean, people talk about autonomous vehicles, and the reality is it hits this brick wall of what kind of connectivity is available today. But with 5G rolling out, suddenly all of this does become possible.
Yeah, I mean, so let's assume it is, right? And that includes streaming, etc. This does go back to, I think, the last time I was on the show, and I think you mocked me for mispronouncing or pronouncing correctly Toyota/Toyota.
I still maintain you mispronounced
it. The reality,
it.
of course, is that they call themselves a mobility company, and Ford. For those people that remember, Ford took out I think it was almost a 90-second or 120-second Super Bowl commercial, and right at the end of that, they just scrolled through a whole bunch of these mobility services that really kind of gave the message that there was so much more than just a car company as well. So yes, absolutely. When you're sitting back, when you're being chauffeured by your self-driving or autonomous vehicle, the opportunities and the possibilities are endless. Now, you know me, the first thing out of my mouth is like, why do we always bastardize it as marketers? We see anything that moves quite literally, and we want to slap our stupid ads on top of it. But the fact is, when you are sitting back on that giant screen, and suddenly on the side, you have panels on the side that are flashing offers or opportunities for you then to opt in and say, oh, look, I can get something here, or that's interesting. There's some kind of an offer there. The ability to then engage with an ad, I don't even know if we'll call it advertising anymore, and more importantly, be rerouted to that place, to then be able to transact. That's a game changer. And I'll say one more thing. We've seen Waze start to do things like that, but this is Waze to a whole, different level.
I love the idea of like, when you're on a flight and you pick up the in-flight magazine and you flip through it and it's got like some articles about different destinations that the airline flies to, and maybe you're not going to any of them and they're not relevant. Well, picture this in your car with like a video, because the car knows where you're going. And perhaps with autonomous vehicles, you'll go longer distances, perhaps because, it'll be easier because it's autonomous. So that the car could drive you 12 hours from Nashville to Toronto, for example. And so since I'm heading to Toronto, I could turn on videos, and with the 5G super speedy video, or the phone, the vehicle itself would know that I'm going to Toronto and offer me to watch some, tourist kind of promotional videos about Toronto. And those videos could even be customized based on my likes and interests as well. Right. If I'm a foodie or a shopper or a business person looking for networking events or whatever it is, those videos can be customized, on the fly. And with 5G, that shouldn't be that hard to do. I really like the idea also of like autonomous vehicles. Once if I ever am 100% confident that the vehicle is going to, do what it's supposed to do, not kill me, it would be really nice to actually like shut off all devices and make it like a really relaxing den where you can, maybe glance out the window, but think of like a really high-end like train car where, yeah, you'll look out the window from time to time, but you're really just enjoying like the quiet. So maybe there'll be like Zen dens instead.
Well, part of the experience of being in a single car is the opportunity to look out the window. I mean, it's when you're in a train, it's much more of a commuter experience. Whereas when you're in a car,
I'm thinking more of a European kind of train, like a train car.
Right. But you're still not seeing straight out the front because you've got a whole bunch of other cars in front of you. So there's this opportunity in the personal vehicle that's just so much more dynamic for people to experience advertising. Marika, I want to ask you what your thoughts are on this. I know that with Curve, you deal with what you call curving a video. I mean, you take a video and you make it more interactive. This has got to be super exciting for you, not just from the standpoint of what's going on in the car, but even the opportunity to do out-of-home video. Making things immediately able to purchase the items in the video. I mean, it's pretty exciting, isn't it?
Absolutely. And my mind always goes straight to the tech infrastructure side. Unfortunately, blessing and a curse. And that's what we're planning for now in terms of not being so kind of married to applications or publisher sites or SSPs or DSPs and that sort of thing, and more so being able to basically connect in with a piece of content through that 5G setup infrastructure is gold for us. So we're currently at Curve really beefing up our AI ML libraries to be able to kind of do this sort of thing in real time to react to these sorts of ideas, meaning that I see an ad that I find to be interesting. You hold up your phone and you can essentially pull that ad back to your device and interact with certain elements of said video or image that you find to be interesting. So we're trying to really create a truly immersive native experience and keeping the tech infrastructures in mind to make it kind of the most agnostic setup as possible. So some folks go the hardware route, and we're really focused on trying to capitalize on the pieces of the infrastructure that we can kind of hone in on the macro level. I also love what Chris said about the contextually relevant customization. I mean, this is our bread and butter at Curve. I mean, that paired with basically our technology, which basically audits additional interaction points, will just feed, certain attribution models or lifetime value models with data elements that they didn't have before. So whomever can figure out the data management side of all of this is probably going to be the one that stands highest at the end of all of this, and probably I would say 2020 or 2021, because 2019 is going to be all about figuring out what that infrastructure looks like.
That's the question, right? I mean, it's just like we talk about 5G rolling out next year, but rolling out is a relative word when you think about what the infrastructure is going to be necessary to make all this possible across the country. I mean, we're talking about a few neighborhoods within major metropolises that are going to have this access to 5G. 5G is a massive build out, Christopher. I mean, it takes, what is it? It's like every 500 feet there needs to be another device. I mean, it's not major towers. We're not talking about having to petition local governments for putting up towers, because they're much smaller devices, but still, it's a massive amount of equipment that needs to be rolled out in order to bring 5G coverage across the entire, landscape that it's going to have to serve.
And that ends up being one of the questions here: is the vehicle technology going to be ready before the 5G technology is ready? And what will that mean if the initial experiences are spotty because the 5G isn't ready necessarily? But if you think of the evolution of the automobile and every industry that developed around it, that infrastructure question that Marika has mentioned has always been one of our biggest challenges anywhere with mobility. Is the technology is ready, but is the infrastructure ready to support it? And
yeah, go ahead.
Please go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, how long have we been talking about these ID graphs on the mobile side? How many different companies say that they're honing in on the perfect ID graph, and that they've said that a couple of years in a row, but yet there's not one ID graph that is adopted by all, and that's a much easier problem to solve, in my opinion, than the one that we're talking about now. So I definitely think 2019 will be a fun roller coaster of trying to figure that out. I just think if we still haven't even figured out the true frequency model between the multiple devices that an individual uses across, all across multiple IPs, etc., then this is just another more difficult problem to add into that. Exciting, yet I'm a little cynical based on the knowledge I have on the mobile side.
Joe, go ahead, Christopher.
No, go ahead with your question to Joe. I'll just
no,
jump in.
No. Believe me,
All right. Well, Joe had said something a few moments ago that caught my attention. Whether we'll call this advertising anymore, and I wanted to kind of frame a possibility too. Is as autonomous vehicle technology improves, and as the vehicles become more commonplace and people become more comfortable with them, it's going to be harder and harder for the automotive or the mobility makers to differentiate their product, because now it truly is. It's not even the driving experience. You're just going from A to B, and going from A to B in a Ford vehicle that drives you there, or a Toyota or Honda or BMW or GM, pretty much becomes the same. I'm wondering if there becomes an opportunity for a differentiator to be the kind of content that we provide within the vehicle. Does GM, Ford, BMW, Audi become their own content producer? Do they partner with an advertiser to say, you know what, just like Netflix, we're going to come up with our own original content? And the only way that you see this is if you're taking a Ford autonomous vehicle or a Chevrolet autonomous vehicle, and can I partner with advertiser A or advertiser B to fund the production of this content? And then that becomes what we now call advertising, this sort of branded original content that's displayed only in the autonomous vehicles of the maker of choice.
Even more fracturing of the streaming space, in other words, which we're going to cover.
Exactly what I was about to say.
It's actually so fascinating because it actually also comes down to how awful automotive commercials are. I mean, they're basically 25 seconds of there's always a pun. And it has absolutely nothing to do with a functional benefit, anything associated with the car, and then you end up with some, APR and offer announcements and a lot of small print. And when you take that whole lifestyle or aspirational component out of it, Chris, to your point, there is nothing left. The ultimate driving machine might have to come down to the ultimate viewing screen.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how that, and by the way, it is exactly probably consistent why we've seen both GM and Ford announce that they're essentially getting out the car business with their, with the announcement that they're stopping producing cars, or at least sedan vehicles.
Joe, on that point about advertising and about how advertising for the car industry being so bad, etc. You wrote the book Life After the 30-Second Spot, and I believe that a lot of the predictions that you brought forward in that book have come true across the board when it comes to the digital space. But by turning the car into the new living room and gaining a captive audience and providing all these out-of-home opportunities in which you can connect with your audience, it seems like the 30-second spot is going to have a massive comeback now, and it's completely unexpected. I mean, what's your take on that?
I mean, I don't think so at all, because for a couple of reasons. One, and they actually go back to even what I wrote in the book. It's not even like something's changed. We've seen attention spans continue to reduce. We've seen simultaneous media consumption and 2 and 3 screen viewing that distracts terribly viewers, especially older fogies like some of us on this call. I'm going to say myself included, unable to multitask. But the other thing, and I said this when I wrote the book, which is, I mean, it's hard to believe, like 14 years ago, I said, why are we calling it TV? It's video, right? It's sight, sound, and motion. And the reality is that big screen in the car, to think that it's going to be, terrestrial or broadcast or network push-based video is absurd. It's going to be Netflix, and it's going to be maybe Hulu is at least as ad supported. It's going to be gaming. It's going to be all the things right now that are absolutely cannibalizing interruptive and traditional video, push-based video. So I'm not sure that this will create a renaissance unless we see the fourth dimension, as I call it, which is interactivity, and of course overlaid with permission, and of course the real promise of mobility here, which is right place, right time.
Well, I want to continue this conversation talking next about rewarded video ads. They've been quite successful in the gaming industry, and now a lot of people are suggesting that they should be used in a lot of other places across the internet. We'll get to that in just a minute, but first I want to pay some bills here and talk a little bit about LinkedIn. Look, I mean, all of you out there, whether you are in the marketing world or not in the marketing world or servicing the marketing world, know that you need to market for your own business. You need to go out there. You need to find new clients. It's all about reaching the right audience at the right time and connecting with them with a message that's going to resonate the most. So if you want customers, if you want to engage them in a place where they are already engaging every day and where they're ready to make a decision, LinkedIn is the right choice for you. Now, I've got a few facts for you. I'm going to run through these real quick. Over 575 million professionals engage with content on LinkedIn. 575 million. It's the world's largest professional network. Of course, there's a lot of people on there, and chances are your future customers are among them. So, first point. Second point, relationships on this network often turn into high quality leads. They turn into website traffic that's valuable for your company. And of course, higher brand awareness. People know about you when you advertise on LinkedIn. Third point, pay attention to this one. Targeting. LinkedIn has the marketing tools to help you target your customers with precision, right down to the job title, down to the company name, down to the industry. Remember, better targeting equals a message your customers care about, which in turn leads to more trust built with your customers. This is fantastic news. And one last fact, pay attention to this one. 4 out of 5 customers who are on LinkedIn are decision makers. 4 out of 5 customers on LinkedIn are decision makers at their companies. So you're building relationships with the kind of people that matter to your bottom line. So I want you to pay attention to this offer. This is your opportunity to get on LinkedIn and try it out for free, because you're going to get a free $100 LinkedIn ad credit and launch your first campaign. And all you have to do is go to linkedin.com/BeanCast. That's linkedin.com/BeanCast for your free $100 ad credit. Now, terms and conditions do apply, so go to the site, check them out. Remember, LinkedIn, absolutely the best place to target your next campaign. And we thank them very much for their support of this program. Well, the early success of rewarded videos was predominantly in the mobile gaming sector, as I mentioned before we started with the advertisement. And you watch an ad on a rewarded video, and then the game rewards you with more plays or an in-game resource or some other kind of reward that makes the ad more tolerable to the people watching it. But some are now claiming that rewarded videos should be the de facto standard in most online video-based advertisements. Marika, I've always questioned this format's effectiveness, because bribing for attention doesn't always mean the viewer is really paying attention. It just means that they're biding their time until the ad is done in order to get the free resource. So is this a real concern or simply a reaction to the plethora of early misguided efforts in this space?
Sure. So I'm going to admit that I initially reacted in that same way. I started reading into this reward trend that was happening and kind of was put off by it, because at Curve, we're all about lean in, opting into interactivity data. So we did some more research due to the trends that are coming up in 2019 in terms of TV ad dollars versus mobile. So in 2019, based on eMarketer, it looks like mobile ad spend is going to top $93 billion, which is over $20 billion that will be spent in TV for the first time ever. That gap last year was closer to and less than 10 billion. So I wanted to read in to understand, because there's going to be a supply issue most likely when you layer in all the other quality, transparency, data situations. So when I actually dug into this, I saw that there is actually the ability to prove out ROI based on the little bit of supply that has been tested. So it actually looks like it at this point does work. Although I'm with you, and that I struggle because you can't really prove out that the ad was,
Well, you
it's
can prove
going to
out
create
you can prove out that the ad worked because it works for gaming. It's just like where where it's being used, it's a perfect opportunity for you to figure out whether or not this is a great ad unit to use. I mean,
yeah.
We're talking about the fact that other games are advertising on games and giving you resources in order to go click through this ad and eventually get to another game that's sort of like the first game you're playing, which makes you download the game. I mean, those situations inflate the numbers in terms of effectiveness. But Dave, I want to bring you in on this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see this as having the legs to exist in another type of format of advertising? Like if McDonald's were to offer you a coupon, is that as effective using rewarded video for your advertisement as, say, what was going on in the gaming industry?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I see, I see my son does it. Like he'll watch videos in order to continue playing games through apps. He does it all the time. But I don't know personally. Personally, I wouldn't. I don't think unless it's, I suppose, unless it's highly targeted to me. And obviously, I'm not a McDonald's type of person, but if it's something that's truly appealing to me, perhaps. But
so, in other words, Chick-fil-A would be your thing. So,
wait, what's that?
So, in other words, Chick-fil-A is what you'd rather prefer. You'd rather prefer Chick-fil-A. No,
well, I do live in the South.
I mean, just another perspective, because there's not enough data to really show if they've done enough connection to the lifetime value of the customer. There is some data that does show ROI. I don't buy the statistical significance, but there has been some positioning that could be a good format to combat some of the subscription fatigue that a bunch of folks are already kind of feeling. So would you rather watch a video ad than, pay for the ability to consume your favorite publication? So there are some positive lenses here, although I kind of cringe at the viewability and VCR KPIs to be kind of forced. And I'm more so into the fourth dimension, as quoted earlier, in terms of intention groups and interactive data. I don't see them being mutually exclusive. So to Dave's point, if this is done right and people are hit at the right time with the right type of ad that's contextually relevant, then it actually could work nicely. But it also is going to matter what's in the box in terms of the video. So if somebody is doing, let's say, a fitness workout and they're offered a video to get another free workout, then make sure that it's not a random, or let's use your example, let's make sure it's not McDonald's after I'm doing these workouts. So and the reason I kind of go down that rabbit hole is after kind of doing research into this, they don't have a strong programmatic infrastructure in place, meaning that the majority of the buys in kind of this opt-in rewarded supply are done site directly or network directly, meaning that the customization and the targeting strategy isn't going to be there yet at scale. So when they start to figure that out and advertisers start kind of creating videos specifically for this space, which prompts more interactivity, I think they can get value. They'll just need to actually have an action after the ad. If they just stop at the ad, it's just gonna be forced, to your point.
I'd be curious too if they prompt the user to say, "Hey, if you don't like these interrupting video ads, pay us."
Yeah.
And see what happens with that, because I think a lot of people are sort of exhausted, as you said. So I think that would be interesting too.
The core thing to remember is that advertising, the future of advertising, as far as I'm concerned, is based on finding the service opportunity and providing a service to the consumer in exchange for their attention. And I think that in its core offering, a rewarded video makes a lot of sense. The trouble is that if you take it out of the context of gaming, where you are really providing a service to the people who are playing the game, you're saying you just pay attention to this ad, we're going to give you 50 more plays of this game. That sounds really like a great value exchange. I'm getting something really.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it does. You're absolutely right. But I think I'm extremely bullish on this across the board. And you don't even, you want to think of an example. How about the first topic? How about autonomous vehicles, and specifically transportation with respect to a cab or some kind of taxi service? You're sitting at the back of the vehicle and we spoke about a captive audience. What about the fact that every commercial you watch and or every question you get correct about that commercial, you get 10 cents or 15 cents or 25 cents off, or even more off your ride, to the point where the entire ride could be free and subsidized by advertisers. And if you think advertisers wouldn't pay for that, I mean, you're deluding yourself, because they absolutely would. They absolutely would. And if you have the opportunity to choose your ads, which is here for, almost gamify that, right? There are 4 different ads. Which one do you want to watch? You want to watch the Amazon one? You want to watch the BMW one? Or you want to watch about erectile dysfunction? I mean, I know which one I would choose. Amazon. I would choose
I was wondering about that.
Amazon. I would choose Amazon. Asking for a friend.
I mean, I completely agree with you. And most of the examples out there that I've seen of this trend do give you the option to buy or to watch the ad. So most of it is not purely forced. It is opt-in. But I love the idea of giving them several brands to opt into versus just allowing them one ad. So at this point, it ends up being kind of a demand infrastructure issue, just like the last topic as well. But a few kind of examples I've seen in the space are the fitness app space, the music streaming space, which makes a lot of sense, the dating app space, which was interesting. They're basically selling filters that you would have to buy otherwise. So a lot of relevant kind of products that they're not allowing you to just simply have access to. So they're almost gamifying the app side of things. But I mean, I completely agree.
Christopher, I want your thoughts on what makes for a good rewarded ad experience. Any thoughts or ideas about that?
No, I'm probably the wrong person to ask about this because I'm the one whose attention is never on the ad. I do the gaming thing.
You're the one who's
ads to get a
perfect.
reward,
You're the perfect choice for this because you are the toughest customer out of all of us. You don't want to pay attention to these rewarded ads. The rest of us are actually doing it.
I think it comes down to what the rest of the panel has said. You've got to find a way to provide enough of a value that that I'm going to be, whether it's a free ride or an additional free workout or something to the effect that, you know what, this is going to be worth the pain, if you want to call it that, of having to sit through another ad. But Joe, when you talked about giving people an option, that changes the game entirely too from our side of the coin. If you've got Amazon and erectile dysfunction and BMW and whoever else, do the rates change that get charged based on which ones are clicked through the most frequently? And does that frankly close the opportunity for a startup brand, an upstart brand, somebody who doesn't have a whole lot of name recognition? That's another thing I think we're going to have to think about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point.
The cost side that I've seen, it's an engagement or maybe even a CPC type of chain there, so not impression based. So in the case that it was a decision, the Amazon versus other brands example, if the other brands were up, they would not be charged unless they were clicked for the opt-in view. But my particular kind of angle on this is, as long as viewability and VCR are not the KPIs for this, then it's definitely worth the test. I listened to this podcast to prepare for this topic, and somebody mentioned a 33% increase in VCR with these ads. Well, of course, I mean, I was, that's not impressive. So as long as you take them, as long as you take it further and say, is there an interactivity or there's some sort of connection to the lifetime value or the purchase right in that ad? And of course, like for curve, if the asset was curved, you can interact with certain objects and have that data pull all the way back to your lifetime value. If it's done that way, then I think it will be done right and combined with the options that you guys laid out. But I don't think that it's a viewability plus VCR type of activation, or you've sold them short, because then that's just like replicating the Outstream situation that happened a few years ago where people hated the user experience, but guess what? It was viewable. You know what I mean? It's just a little, it's important to make sure you change the KPI, and to your point, make the cost structure make sense for the brand and or agency.
And if you do it wrong, your VCR is still flashing 12.
Well done, sir. Well done. Hey, I want to continue this conversation about video by talking about a little piece of news I found this week. Netflix is in danger of losing 20% of its content as content owners begin to launch their own streaming services. Now, that's pretty deadly for Netflix, potentially damaging to them. But the real question, Dave, is can the market support such a fractured model where no single streamer can offer an aggregated content offering, forcing customers to subscribe to more services than they can afford? We've talked about this on the show a number of times. At a certain point, there becomes an overwhelming sense of I'm paying more now for all these over-the-top services than I ever paid for cable. Why am I doing this?
Yeah. And that question does come up. I mean, and it's going to continue to come up because it's already starting to be fractured a little bit, right? With different shows on Hulu or Amazon Prime, and of course Netflix. So Interesting days ahead. I think it's going to be rough for the consumer if and I actually, when that story came out, I actually tweeted it. I said, like, this is not going to be good for consumers. That's how, or I think I posted on LinkedIn or something. But that was, and I got a lot of response from that because I think that's really what it comes down to, is it's going to suck for the consumers because suddenly you're going to be forced, as you're saying, to like pay for all these different packages in order to get different programming, and it's just not going to be affordable for the consumer. So they're going to have to find other means of watching what they want to watch.
You know, for me, a lot of the streaming universe is, it's kind of split down the middle between those who support advertising and those who say that it's all about subscription. And I wonder how this is going to impact marketers, Joe, because when we're talking about marketing and advertising on these streaming services, it's going to become increasingly difficult for me to get the reach and frequency I need in order to effectively create an awareness campaign when I have to buy ads across a whole bunch of different streaming services instead of making my one buy on the network. This sounds like it's going to get really expensive to reach audience now.
I mean, besides being expensive, it's just going to become an absolute logistical nightmare for agencies that are already so talent starved or strapped, and it's just going to be an absolute mess. And there are a couple of even more obvious points, which is when you look at the hour of programming on a streaming service, the ship has sailed in terms of trying to command up to 20 minutes per hour with interruptive advertising. So the actual number of opportunities you can count on one hand, and of course, we can discuss this topic a whole bunch of ways, right? One of them is at some point when every single one of these godforsaken broadcast and cable networks are now trying to sell their premium service, etc., and the consumer's looking at their bill, their a la carte bill, going, wait a second, I'm going back to the cord. Because I'm now paying 3 times as much, and I keep forgetting my passwords and my logins and etc. It is going to become an absolute nightmare, and the bottom will fall out of the market. And we can just see it happening, and it's just insane. The other part is that I wrote about this case study extensively. In Built to Suck in my new book, and one of the things I said is CBS All Access, strategically so much wrong with this model, and one of them is that they have this Netflix identity crisis. It's like, who do you want to be, right? Are you CBS or are you Netflix? You can't. You got to choose which. As Yogi Berra said, if you come to a fork in the road, take it. Which one are you going? Because if you want the consumer to pay with their money per month, you can't have your cake and eat it and still advertise to them. So either you got to give them that ad-free Netflix clone type of solution, or you just got to be CBS. And why on God's green earth would you start to gate and put your best content behind a walled garden when you are desperate to be able to get as many people to watch your premium content as possible for free, so that you can ram advertising down their throat? That's your business model. So they're basically shooting themselves in the foot. They all are, and this will not end well for them.
Well, it's a big problem, right? Because each person or each group have their own original content that they hold on to. And so suddenly, as we all know, and even as a user on Netflix, Friends is not there one day and then it's there the next and then it's gone again. I think it's still there right now, but for now. But with
confirming that's true.
Yeah, there you go. But with Disney, with Disney pulling out of Netflix and AT&T are doing their own thing now, I think that's where the biggest challenge is going to come is having quality original content that people actually want to watch and you can get enough people talking about.
But the whole original content thing, they've got that in spades. I mean, Netflix is creating amazing content, a lot of crappy content, but they're creating a lot of amazing content. HBO is creating amazing content. AMC is creating amazing content. But at a certain point, when you don't have any single source for aggregating all of that content for you to watch, it becomes totally prohibitive. And what you're doing is creating the model for churn. You're not creating loyalty. You're not creating customers who are going to subscribe to you and be there week in, week out. It's like, I'm going to subscribe to AMC this month because I want to watch all the Breaking Bad and Walking Dead stuff. Then I'm going to churn that out because Game of Thrones is coming on, so I'm going to go to HBO. That doesn't seem like it's a model that's going to work for the subscribers, which is going to
changing the channels with your credit card.
Right.
It's not going to. Model won't work. That model won't work for the consumer, but that model is also eventually not going to work for the content producers either. And you're going to end up just seeing a sort of consolidation where, we're talking about the near term of having potentially Disney and CBS All Access and Netflix and Hulu and Amazon Prime and all the. I think at some point you just won't be able to produce, because the advertising revenue isn't there. You won't be able to produce the original content that draws the subscribers, and you'll have Doctari going on. You'll go out and thin the herd and go tie something to the tree and kill it. And this ultimately is going to result probably in about 2 or 3 streaming services that survive, that get not that I think HBO is going anywhere, but potentially Game of Thrones, if HBO starts to falter, moves over to a Netflix or a Hulu or something like that. I do think everything that we've just talked about is in the short term, what's going to happen in the next 2 or 3 years. I think if you extend the ladder a little further out and look at 8-10 years down the line, I think it's going to swing back in the consumer's favor.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at like Netflix, for example. Like last quarter, I was reading an article in LA Times about the fact that Netflix missed its, and I'm not sure which quarter this is, but Netflix missed its new subscriber forecast by about 1 million. So that's a scary thing. And the other thing too is that they're currently raising $2 billion for original content. One opportunity I see for marketers or for advertisers, I guess. Obviously, Netflix is not, is ad free, and I'm sure we all followed that. Do you remember when they actually had promotions running, like pre-rolls, and every Netflix advertisers were livid, or excuse me, users were livid. They're like, "What the hell?" And they turned that off pretty quickly. But it'd be interesting with the opportunity for brands to get into the original content game by good old fashioned product placement.
100%. The digital version or the video version of native advertising.
What I hear being said is what I've been maintaining over and over again on this program for the past few months, and it comes down to we're going back to cable, people. I mean, it's just like, it may not be cable the way that existed in the past, but it's essentially, you're going to subscribe to AT&T's DirecTV Now app, or you're going to subscribe to Comcast's app, and you're going to have access to all these channels, and it's basically going to be exactly like television, only you have the opportunity to you see where I'm going on this. I mean, it's just like there's no reason to think that cable is going to be dead. It's just being resurrected into a format where I can take it with me wherever I go. That the problem was not that I didn't have enough choice with my cable subscription. The problem was that I couldn't take my cable subscription with me when I went to California. And it's just like, that problem is being solved. And once it's solved, I think that's the future. Marika, any last thoughts on this? I mean, how does this help or hurt marketers? And I mean, obviously, there's a lot of targeting opportunity with a whole bunch of applications and over-the-top solutions. But it seems like this diversification of the content universe is not going to be broad enough for advertisers to get the results they need.
Oh, absolutely not. I don't remember who said logistical nightmare, but violently agree with that. I mean, on the Curve side, our POV is to reinvent the true native experience, like you guys just said, in terms of product placement, or basically being able to sponsor something about a product inside of a video. And I just say that because if somebody has on the shirt, everyone thinks back to the Friends episode that talks about, if only we could make things interactive. But if that shirt is sold at 5 different department stores, allowing them the opportunity to kind of bid on that sponsorship, that's our POV. But to circle back to your question, in terms of how we plan on doing that at Curve, we would have to go on an app by app basis with different SDK implementations, even if we don't go the hardware route, which still makes it even more difficult for the tech side and the data side to innovate, because they're basically going to make what currently sits as a group of 3 or 4 applications to 5 to 10. And I mean, if anyone manages SDKs and having to keep up with the different versions, I mean, it's already extremely difficult, and they would just be, they would just be increasing that by more than double. So it's going to make the ability to create the appropriate targeting experience for the customer that's perfectly contextually relevant. It's going to make that even more difficult. So they're not really keeping the customer first in that side of the thing, in that side of the house. Although I know that they're thinking that they are in terms of their kind of control and serving up of the content and what they feel like is the most simple fashion.
I'm kind of curious here. I just had this thought of, what if the future is your car manufacturer pays for these different packages by these, like Netflix, for example, so that you buy your autonomous BMW and it comes with Netflix.
Yeah, I mean, opportunities like that are bound to happen. I mean, it's just like Joe kind of touched on that earlier when he talked about the fact that your ride from Uber is picked up by the advertiser who's sponsoring that ride. I mean, there's all kinds of opportunities for content, for entertainment, and for advertising to pay for the user's experience and create a service opportunity, which goes back to the premise of the future of advertising is all about service. Really interesting space. Go ahead.
And perhaps the 5G can help solve that, because if you get into an Uber, you're not going to want to have to find where you were. Like Friends has, how many seasons and how many episodes per season. You would need the Wi-Fi to essentially follow you to pick up exactly where you were, which I know it sounds very creepy, but that's what you would need to happen for that to actually work. Because, I mean, if I'm taking a 10-minute ride, it would take me half the time to find exactly where I was in a streaming service. But if somebody can figure out the quote unquote logistical nightmare, it actually would serve the customer in that sense.
Well, we're running short on time, so I want to roll into the last topic real quick. There was an interesting Digiday article analyzing the growing divide between ad buyers and publishers about who is to blame for shrinking ad revenue. But one point made in the article struck me as particularly interesting. Joe, is a core problem that the drive by publishers to close deals is leading to poor negotiation tactics and the establishment of unreasonably low price expectations by clients? I thought that was a pretty insightful comment. What's your take?
It's a tough one, because I've worked on both sides. I mean, I've worked with publishers. I was on the agency side. I just did a project now, actually last year, a major content strategy for a consumer packaged goods company, and it was really interesting because we spoke to the agency and we spoke to a lot of the publishers. Some of the publishers even mentioned in one of the source articles, and the publishers almost across the board complained about the agency, and they complained about the fact that they and look, I mean, I'm going to represent both sides, to be fair. Think thou dost protest too much. They would complain that they were just brought in at the back end of the RFP process. They would just, be given this RFP, told to turn the thing around within 24 to 36 hours or some, ridiculous amount of time frame. And they didn't feel like they could be strategic enough, and they didn't feel like they could be equal partners. And they really just felt that they were just kind of like tactical hostages, so to speak. And I was talking to some pretty senior people at some pretty senior publishers. So I'll say that. So they were complaining. Now, if they're complaining, you can imagine if you're a tier 2 or 3 or 4 publisher, and if ultimately you're, kind of fighting for those scraps at the bottom of the barrel, and you're in that whole kind of, programmatic and native, race to the bottom. I think what's really happening is there really are, they say the cream always rises to the top, but the reality is that it goes back to almost, it's so appropriate that I think Chris and Dave are on here, because we've heard all of these discussions, over a decade ago, right? Is it branding or is it direct response in the early days of digital? And that's what's really happening. Either you're part of that high-end custom solution, we won't get out of bed for high six figures or seven figures conversation, or you're basically kind of Oliver Twist with your hands out saying, please, sir, can I have some more? And so the reality is, as always, and ironically, as I wrote in the first book, it's both, right? The publishers are to blame and the agency is to blame. And it never and it, just to be fair as well, for every agency behaving badly, it's because their clients are forcing them to essentially behave badly. So you have this domino effect. The buck stops and starts with the client and cascades all the way down to the publisher. And as I said, everyone has got to look at themselves in the mirror and determine, is this a race to the bottom, or are we trying to kind of get to the top? Rising tide floats all boats.
And with that, it's time for the Ad Fail 5. But before we get to that segment of the show, I want to take this quick opportunity to cough my guts out. I'm dying here. I want to take this opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to do some shameless plugs.
Was that your shameless plug?
I am not doing well. All right. So starting with Christopher Barger, you can find him at sme.org. Tell us what's going on in your world, Christopher. What would you like to promote?
Sure. Well, you've just done it for me very nicely, Bob. SME is formerly the Society of Manufacturing Engineers. We are a nonprofit that advocates for the manufacturing industry, and we've just in the last week and a half, one of my big projects when I got there a few months ago was to relaunch the website, and I am looking for lots of feedback and wanting people to go in and take a look and tell us, for a nonprofit, for a manufacturing agency, what works, what doesn't. So please go to sme.org, take a look, send me an email at cbarger@sme.org. I'd love to hear what you think of the new site.
That sounds like a great opportunity. Yeah, definitely check that out. Next up, Dave Delaney. You can find him at futurefourth.co. It's .co, right? Or is it
No, it's .com.
It's .com. Okay, so futurefourth.com. That's the home of his consultancy. Tell us what's going on in your world. What would you like to promote?
Yes, I'm almost at a year since I rebooted my personal email newsletter, and I'd like to invite everybody to check it out. Of course, you can unsubscribe if you hate it, and I hope you don't. It's called Nice Maker. It's my Nice Maker. And if you go to nicemaker.co in that case, that website will give you a free download of a book I wrote as well about using improv to improve your life. But the whole idea of the newsletter is it's about me. I share different stories, different articles, different tools and tips each week in a music video that I like each week, every Friday at around 10 a.m. Central. So it's chock full of just fun, interesting stuff. And I try to keep it nice, only positive sort of stuff, because there's too much of the other stuff out there these days.
And that is so true. That sounds like a great opportunity for people to connect with you and connect with your content. So definitely check that out. Joseph Jaffe, you can find him at thehmsbeagle.com. Tell us what's going on in your world, Joe. What would you like to promote?
I'm so busy subscribing at the moment to Dave's newsletter and checking out Chris's page. It's great to see what these guys are up to. So besides promoting you guys, I two things that I actually want to share. The first, and I posted this, I think, last week. I've always had two bucket list items professionally. One was to write a book, and I think I've done that. And the other one is to teach. And I probably should give another hat tip to another old friend, CC Chapman, who has shown us and led the way. But I actually joined the West Virginia University Reed College of Media as an instructor. And,
Nice.
And I'm writing a course, an original course called Disruptive Innovation for their Integrated Marketing Communications Online Graduate Program. The course will launch in March. I'm super excited. It's really, really been a dream of mine. And I'll probably share more information, as it, in terms of even if people can enroll. I don't even know yet, but I'm very excited about that. The other thing, back in the day, there was this new podcast called the BeanCast, and I remember at the time Jaffe Juice was living large, and and nothing gave me more pleasure than to promote the BeanCast, and I was so excited about it. I certainly think today it is without question the best marketing podcast in the world. But I've actually decided to go back and reboot Jaffe Juice.
Oh,
and,
nice.
And it's great because it's like, the only listeners are people that didn't unsubscribe from the feed, but most people that actually subscribe, probably that feed doesn't even work anymore. So if you are interested in listening to me again, it's 30 minutes every week following the same format with Jeff Smith and, winners and losers, rant of the week. It's really given me so much joy doing it. Just go to iTunes and search Jaffe Juice and subscribe again. And one more thing as well, which is there's a call-in number, 203-689-8661, 203-689-8661. Send me a voice message, ask me a question, have a comment, and I'll try and answer it on next week's show. So I'm keeping it very small, very self-contained. In no way will this be cannibalistic to the BeanCast, because the BeanCast is the greatest marketing podcast in the world.
Yeah.
And those are my
Most
plugs.
definitely.
Those are my plugs.
And besides, we
Nice.
got to where we are by cannibalizing your audience. So, I mean, it's just like
exactly.
I
I want them back. I want them back.
I love that you're using the same graphic, the same album art that you did originally with
Everything
Jeff.
is
I just subscribed again, so there you go.
Everything is the same.
Nice.
And last but not least, Marika Roque. You can find her at curveit.com. That's the home of Curve Interactive. Tell us what's going on in your world, Marika. What would you like to promote?
Sure. So Curve is an interactive video technology company where we can basically ingest any video content and make it any object interactive. Our patent is at the Curve level, meaning that we can get more precise than any other video technology that's out there. And we kind of collect that new data and use it to kind of pull people down the funnel, lifetime value, that sort of thing. If you go to Curvidi, short for video, so KERVIDI.com, you can see a few examples of the tech in action, but really just trying to help marketers, brands, really add that fourth dimension to the videos that they already have. Of course, in the future, we'd want them to think about our technology when producing, but one of our awesome value propositions is that you don't actually have to change your video. And we make it extremely kind of streamlined to do that. So we kind of see, we see ourselves in the future of a lot of the conversations we had today in terms of, being the true form of native advertising. And in order for us to do that, you'd use our tech down to the shirt on Rachel and Friends back in the day and allow that to truly be purchased or learn more, that sort of thing. So a lot of folks say shoppable video, but we like to just say dimension, because it's not just shoppability. It's information about an actor, actress, or any kind of the options are endless. So again, check it out at KERVIDI.com, because you can just kind of see it in action. And on the other side of the house, it makes us a really interesting data company, because we are capturing this interaction data by object in these videos. So allows us to kind of segment out groups of intenders down to the actual specific object or a group of objects, which has been really interesting. So think of like hover time by object and, then connecting that to your lifetime value. So I know a little technical, but just think adding another dimension to video, making it more of a two-way conversation in preparation for a lot of the things we talked about today.
Yeah, it's a pretty impressive demo, so I recommend it highly if you want to check it out. It's pretty cool to see a video become clickable and everything is actively engageable. It's pretty amazing. As for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me, and you can even find out how to advertise on the program. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. And now it's time for the Ad Fail 5, a rundown of the lowest moments in advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. And first up, the Cheesecake Factory thought their 40th anniversary would be a good time to introduce their new DoorDash food delivery partnership. So, Christopher, they offered 40,000 free slices of cheesecake to customers who ordered through the DoorDash app. What could possibly go wrong here? What could go wrong with a situation like that, except for fights and double parked cars outside of restaurants and angry customers and everybody complaining about the fact that they didn't get their cheesecake and having to up the amount to 60,000, which makes no sense for a 40th anniversary. Any thoughts on this, Christopher?
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in. I don't know.
Sorry, I had muted myself. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, Chris, you can take my topic or you can comment as well. But the thing that shocked me about this is that they were all gone within 2 hours. 40,000 people need a free piece of cheesecake.
Yeah, 2 PM, right?
It's just a reminder that if you are in marketing or advertising and you're coming up with what you think is going to be a great idea like this, for God's sakes, please think of the logistics. Think this through. It just we get so caught up in our own ideas, we don't think about the execution. And clearly, that's what happened in this case. Nobody really thought through what this was going to mean when all the DoorDash drivers were going to be showing up at restaurants and getting angry with each other because they cut line for a cake.
The worst part about this is this has only happened, like 5 times to 5 other brands in this calendar year. I mean, this is not that hard to figure out. All right, Samsung was caught red-handed when a photographer called them out for using one of his DSLR stock photos, Marika, in an ad showing what great pictures their camera phone could take. This one's like a gotcha. They took the photo and they actually doctored it to make it look more like it came from one of their phones. But they got called out for it, didn't they?
This one is just, I scratched my head when I saw this in the news. I mean, we all know that people know everything in terms of our world today. How did they think that somebody wasn't going to find that out? I mean,
especially when you're using somebody else's photograph, you'd think that maybe if they got a photograph online, that photographer might be online, maybe.
Exactly. I mean, that's my opinion on this. Is like I don't want to talk negatively about any brand, but they had to have known, and if they didn't think that they would get caught doing this, that's the silliest thing. I mean, we're online, like 99.9% of folks are online, multiple screens, multiple devices. Really, Samsung? And you actually own multiple devices.
Now, next up, we've got in the largest Children's Online Privacy Protection Act fine ever, Oath has agreed to pay $5 million. This is almost a joke. $5 million to settle for knowingly using cookies, geolocation, and other data points, Joe, to serve targeted ads to minors. First of all, the balls of this, but second of all, $5 million, like that, it sounds like a lot of money. It is a lot of money, but not to Oath.
Yeah, I mean, it's insane. Look, it's good that they're finally getting fined, but all I could think of, like, how ironic. Their name, like, with the company called Oath. That's what I call a broken oath.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, next up, in a case of guest experience gone horribly wrong, the pictures on this are wonderful. I hate doing these that are so visual, but a UK couple who routinely visited the Royalton, Jamaica resort on the birthday of their son, who passed away in 2014, arrived at a room decorated in honor of their son, complete with a life-sized effigy lying on the bed. The pictures here are truly horrifying, Dave. I mean, the woman was the mother was completely shaken, over this experience. It was horrifying to walk in and see a dead body lying on the bed.
I couldn't. I was flabbergasted when I saw that story. Like absolutely gobsmacked. I could not believe it. It's just ridiculous. It's just so terrible. Like just terrible.
It is a shame that you can't put a common sense test on an employment application. This was a human equivalent of the flashing 12. This was awful.
Yes, exactly.
And last but not least, Google has a training system that uses a plain yellow block in place of an ad. It allows them to train their people on how to put an ad out there in the real world. Well, apparently that block got loose, Joe, in a real customer's ad buy, blanketing the internet with yellow banner ads and saddling the search giant with a $10 million publisher bill because the publisher's still got to get paid. What's your take on this one?
In related news, the Yellow Pages is doing great at the moment.
And with that, have something to add to this list or just want to discuss it? Comment online, use the hashtag AdFail5. That's pound AdFail and the number 5. And that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an iTunes listener, we've also provided a direct link to the iTunes Music Store, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory of iTunes. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C. Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
You know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. Just like, okay, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know, like if it's, you know, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly. It's like exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? Exactly.
Cool beans.